Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me. Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. In just over 60 days, the daily increase in COVID cases has multiplied almost 58 times, rising from just 66 on the 31st of January to over 3,800 on the 2nd of April. And that leads to a simple but critical question. Is this a matter of concern, or is there a reassuring explanation? That's the key issue I shall discuss today with one of our most highly regarded virologists, a visiting professor at Ashoka University, but presently a senior research fellow at Green Templeton College in Oxford, Professor Shahid Jameel. Professor Jameel, let me start with that question, which I presume is at the top of most people's minds as they watch this interview with you. How much of a concern is it that the steady daily increase of COVID cases means that between January the 31st, when the increase was just 66, it has multiplied almost 58 times to 3,800 plus cases on April the 2nd. Is this sharp multifold increase in just 2 months a matter of concern? And if the answer is yes, how much concern?
Well, I don't really think it's a matter of huge concern, Karan. When you say 58 times, you're coming from a very low baseline. 3,800 cases in a country of 1.4 billion people is minuscule. So I wouldn't really pay too much attention to that. It's not a wave, it's a blip, a minor blip, if I may say so. It will pass. And I think from the way previous blips have looked like, this is likely to be momentary. It will pass in a week or two. Yeah.
So what you're saying is that the facts or numbers on their own can be misleading. The numbers suggest a 58 times increase in just over 2 months, but that should be seen in the perspective of the fact we began from a very low base. And as you say, this is a blip, it's not a surge, and it will pass.
Yes, absolutely. And numbers can also be sometimes uh, not proper. When you say 3,800, the numbers are actually going to be higher than 3,800. They're not 3,800. I can't tell you how much they are because remember, only those people who are showing any symptoms are being tested. Those who are not showing any symptoms are not being tested. And we know that a large majority of COVID cases are asymptomatic. So the numbers probably going to be about 3 times more. But even that is not going to be much of a concern in a country of our size.
Let me put one other comment made, this time by the World Health Organization, and ask you to tell me whether it's a matter of significance or simply a matter of statistical detail. According to the WHO, and I'm quoting, the highest proportional increase of new COVID-19 cases was observed in India in the entire Southeast Asian region. And my question is this a matter of significance or just a statistical detail?
I think it's a statistical detail at this point. Unless we see more people getting into hospitals, we shouldn't really worry about this too much. We know that this virus keeps infecting, keeps coming back to infect people who have had the vaccine, who've had prior infection. Immunity wanes off quickly. We know that already. India is a very dense country, very densely populated country. So it's bound to happen. Something like this is bound to happen.
Let's then at this point talk a little about the variant which is dominant, which is XBB.1.16. I believe more than 30% of the genome sequencing done in March was of this variant, and according to Vinod Skaria, the proportion is increasing. Clearly, therefore, XBB.1.16 is the most fast spreading variant in India at the moment. Now, this variant is said to be a combination of two Omicron sublineages, and it has, I believe, three additional mutations on what's called the spike protein. Could you explain in layman's language what that amounts to?
Right. So we have seen earlier that variants have arisen because certain positions on the spike protein, which is the protein that covers the surface of the virus, have changed. And when these proteins change, the virus sometimes binds a little better to cells in our uh, respiratory system. It can evade antibodies that can bind to the virus and prevent infection. So every time there is a mutation, there is a worry of that happening. Now, what has happened here is instead of just linear mutations on a given background, two different variants have recombined. So that's another way of mutating. And when recombination happens, you either get the worst of two worlds or you get the best of two worlds. And I'm talking from a virus perspective. Apparently, if you get the best of both worlds, you see that virus. If you get the worst of two worlds, that virus disappears, you never see it. So in this case, two, two variants from the BA.2 lineage that was circulating into 2022 came together, and this was first detected around mid August last year, and that became the XBB variant. Now, another mutation, this XBB variant was found to have 16 additional mutations compared to either of the two parent viruses. Now, another variant developed, which was called XBB.1, which had an extra mutation over XBB. What we are seeing now is a lineage of XBB.1, and this has three more mutations compared to its parent XBB.1. So mutations seem to be accumulating, and as mutations accumulate, the virus evades pre existing antibodies, and that's why we say that immunity wanes. The recent spread of this variant, the speed of this variant, as you said, Vinod suggests, tells us that this variant is much better at spreading compared to the other variants in the population. So it's sort of competing out the other variants. And we have seen this happen throughout this pandemic. You know, the Wuhan virus was pushed out by the D614G variant. That was pushed out by the Alpha. The Alpha was pushed out by the Delta. The Delta was pushed out by the Omicron. So this has been happening continuously and it continues to happen. What is reassuring is we are not seeing a drastically different variant like Omicron was compared to Delta or like Delta was compared to the original. All we are seeing is variants of the Omicron lineage. And that is why we are not seeing this spike in hospitalizations. Well, the other reason, of course, is that a lot of people have already been exposed to the virus or to the vaccine.
Let me pick up on that last point. All the newspaper reports in India and several elsewhere where XBB.1.16 is prevalent, all these reports, relying upon a variety of different experts, say that XBB.1.16 is more infectious than other Omicron lineages, but there is no evidence of severity of disease, of increased hospitalization, or an increase in mortality. I take it from what you're saying, you agree with that analysis. And secondly, if you do, does it mean that this is a reassuring situation? It may be more infectious, but it is not a cause of great worry in terms of severity of disease, hospitalization, or mortality.
Well, clearly, the way it has spread, it is more infectious. That's a no brainer. We also know that people are not piling into hospitals as they were 2 years back or even early in 2022. So it's not a matter of concern really. It's an irritation, but I wouldn't say it's anything beyond that.
So, to go back to the question that I posed in the introduction, when I asked, are these rising numbers and the present situation a matter of concern, or is there a reassuring explanation? You're clearly saying there is a reassuring explanation, and this is not a matter of concern. I'm simply repeating that because I think it's a point the audience would like adumbrated.
Yes, I would say it's not a matter of great concern, but any time a virus like this is circulating so freely, we should pay attention to it. And where we should pay attention is not in going and testing anyone and everyone, but keeping an eye on the healthcare system, hospitals, and also if we are to do testing in a way that can predict what is going to come in a given region.
Okay.
And by that, I'm alluding to wastewater surveillance, which has turned out to be so successful. There are examples of good wastewater surveillance in India, but unfortunately, that is not being replicated at other sites. If we were to do that, then simply by doing wastewater surveillance, you could predict with reasonable accuracy where the next spike in cases is going to come, and therefore you can get prepared.
I'll pick up on those points you're making about wastewater surveillance and other measures that the government or scientists should take in a moment's time. But let me first put to you something that the Director General of the World Health Organization said in September. His precise words were, "The end is in sight." And everyone believed that he was suggesting that we were very close to endemicity. Has this resurgence 6 months later contradicted and undermined his claim, or is this how, in fact, endemicity will be achieved with small but hopefully short lasting seasonal surges in cases? In other words, are we on the road to endemicity? And was the Director General correct when he said the end is in sight? Or has this resurgence contradicted and undermined him?
Well, endemicity is different to different people. Uh, the virus, this the virus story is medically not over, but socially and politically it's over. As far as endemicity is concerned, the way I understand endemicity is a virus that is, or any infectious agent that always present in a population, which causes low levels of infection and low levels of mortality. And the best example of that is seasonal flu. Seasonal flu is with us all the time. There are certain times of the year when cases go up, like they're going up right now in India and other parts of the northern hemisphere. But mortality is still low. Now, if you look at the mortality due to COVID, recent data shows that mortality in India is roughly 0.2%. And that is if you look at confirmed cases versus confirmed deaths. Now, confirmed cases is a number that is subject to a lot of problems because testing is very biased. Testing is happening only in those people who have symptoms. And if you If you agree with what Gagandeep Kang said on your show a few weeks back, the these Christian Medical College Vellore study, which was started around the time of Delta, clearly shows that about two-thirds of COVID cases are asymptomatic. So if those people are not even going to be tested, the denominator becomes even higher, and therefore your mortality rate is 0.1% or less. That's what seasonal flu is. So if seasonal flu at that mortality is endemic, why wouldn't COVID at that mortality be called endemic? It is
So,
endemic.
in a nutshell, and I'm using layman's language, but you're saying that COVID has either become like or is becoming like seasonal flu. It'll always be there. From time to time, a small number or a bigger number will get it. They will
Yeah,
recover after a couple of days of illness. The mortality will be very, very low, somewhere around 0.1, 0.2% of those affected. But the situation will be essentially like flu. It'll be there. People are liable to get it, but equally certainly the vast, vast majority will recover.
absolutely. And just like flu, we know that there are certain kinds of people who are more prone to get severe, disease after flu. The same is with COVID. There are people with certain comorbidities who have to be careful, just like they have to be careful with flu.
Let me then come to a second issue of concern. As of today, nearly 90% of people over the age of 12 have had both doses of the vaccine, whether it's Covaxin or Covishield. But only 27% have actually had the booster dose. Do the present circumstances require that the government should make a fresh effort to push that 27% figure up closer to, say, 80 or 90%?
I think it'll be good if boosters are given because science has shown that boosters certainly protect from infection for a certain period of time. And the trick here is to really keep the number of infections down as well. The more you allow infections to flourish, the more the higher you have chances of mutation events, recombination events, and who knows, chance might give a very different virus. So yes, I think since we have all the tools, we should deploy the tools.
So, your advice to the government is boost the boosters. In other words, make another special effort to kick up the percentage who've had boosters from 27 closer to 80 or 90. This is a moment, this is the need of the hour.
Yes, and especially for people who have existing comorbidities. I think for them it is very important to get boosters.
Talking about people who are particularly vulnerable, is there a case for giving a fourth dose, which at the moment is not permitted under Indian law? But is there a case for giving a fourth dose specifically to sections of the community that are vulnerable? The elderly, the immunocompromised, and arguably healthcare or at least hospital workers.
Well, let's do the third dose first. But also, if you see what is included in the fourth dose in the West, science has not supported that you combine two different viruses and give that as a vaccine. It has provided very little additional benefit. So, yes, if you are a cash rich country, you may want to do that. But if you have other health priorities to look after, I don't think that should be a top priority. In any case, I would say a very large percentage of Indians are already infected. So they are already bringing in that immunity, which is better any day from immunity that comes from vaccines.
So a fourth or fifth dose may be acceptable in a cash-rich Western country.
Yeah,
In India, where you have multiple competing health priorities, it is not a requirement, it is not a priority.
absolutely.
Very quickly, should the government at this point step up testing, or is it more important to increase genome sequencing so we are fully aware both of the way the virus is mutating and the speed with which that's happening? Which of the two is more important as a focus for the government?
Well, first of all, population testing really has no meaning anymore. Uh, Testing people who are symptomatic has value in it, and a fraction of those should be sequenced to know what's developing among people who are showing symptoms. But then I come back to this wastewater surveillance. When you do wastewater surveillance and something turns up positive, I think that needs to be, and the way wastewater surveillance is done is actually done by sequencing only. So you already know what sequences are circulating. So if I were looking after public health systems, I would say focus more attention on early warning systems rather than investing in what has already happened.
And that is what wastewater surveillance does. It's an early warning system. It
Yes.
identifies areas where you aren't aware that it's spreading, but the wastewater surveillance reveals it is spreading, and you therefore know this is my new
Yes.
focus of attention.
Yes, and there is an added advantage of wastewater surveillance. When you are doing the surveillance, you're not looking for just for the COVID virus. Everything shows up. And by doing data analysis, you can find out what else is there. So maybe there is another infection that is speaking up, and you wouldn't know if you were focused completely on COVID.
What you're saying, Professor Jameel, suggests to me, a layman, that wastewater surveillance is something governments should be doing all the time. They should have a system that
Yes.
is constantly wastewater surveying so that you're not just picking up on COVID, but you're also keeping a track of other infections that are spreading which you don't know about. It's a way of advance warning about the big total health picture of the country.
Absolutely. And see, in countries like India, which have a very large population, a lot of other problems to deal with, we don't really know what is the baseline for any given infection throughout the year. And unless you know the baseline, how will you know when something peaks up? So, looking to determining the baseline is very boring work. It doesn't get you on Karan Thapar's show, or it doesn't get you, front page news in a newspaper. But it is absolutely essential. Unless you know the baseline, you don't know the peak.
How good or how effective is the system of wastewater surveillance in India? Or do we have to start from scratch pretty
No, we,
effectively?
we don't have to start from scratch. The Bangalore Municipal Corporation is working very closely with the Tata Institute for Genetics and Society in Bangalore, and they have set up a really good system. The the corporation is sending samples, and scientists are actually advising them in real time what's showing up. Uh, and I think that's a model that's been fairly successful. That model needs to be replicated in other parts of the country. I mean, I think they're doing a little bit in Hyderabad now, also in Pune. But why shouldn't it be in Lucknow, in Kolkata, in Bhubaneswar, in Mumbai? It should be everywhere. Everywhere where there is a high concentration of people, and there is a sewage system that goes through a processing center. It can
Okay.
easily be done.
In other words, we've invented the wheel. We just now need to take it to every important city and population center in the country.
Absolutely.
My last question: what is your advice to the general audience? Do we need to increase mask wearing? The truth is, most people have given up wearing masks for several months now. But should we be going back to that habit of mask wearing? And secondly, do we need to be particularly extra cautious in closed spaces where there are a large number of people?
Everything that you said. Uh, I would not advocate just mask mandates. Mask mandate is a different thing. And recently, some people have started saying that, oh, there are scientific studies that show that masks don't work. That's wrong. The scientific study has shown that mask mandates don't work, and they're two different things. A mandate means the government tells everyone to wear a mask. Most people will wear a mask, but they won't wear it effectively. And therefore, when you analyze population data, you find that masks didn't help. But for an individual, if a mask is worn correctly, it's a no brainer that it affords protection. It affords protection from droplets, if not aerosols. So, if you are, my advice would be to be sensible. If you are in a closed space, if you are in a crowded space like a public transport, in a bus or a suburban train, wear a mask. And wear a mask, especially if you yourself have a cough and cold. It becomes our social responsibility to protect others. And the most effective protection is when the spreader is wearing a mask instead of when everyone else is wearing a mask and the spreader is not wearing a mask. So,
This suggests to me that when you go to the cinema or the theater, which is a closed space where people are sitting very close to each other, a mask might be advisable, but it may not be necessary if you're watching an IPL match in an open air stadium.
yeah, or if you're going to the park for a walk, you don't need one. But yes, in closed spaces, especially closed air conditioned spaces where air is recirculated, uh, it would be advisable to wear a mask.
Professor Jameel, thank you very much indeed. I think your words of assurance will be particularly calming for people because the numbers have begun to cause concern. I won't go so far as to say frightened, but cause concern and anxiety. And you put it in perspective. We are, as you said, at a stage where COVID has become like flu. It will always be around. Some people will get it. They may be ill for a day or two. The vast, vast, vast majority will recover. The mortality rate will, at the end, be no greater than the mortality rate of flu. That, I think, is very reassuring to hear. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Karan. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.